Hello, everyone, and my name is Akhil Feroz. I work at the College of Science and the College of Health and Medicine marketing team. And welcome to the Master of Professional Psychology webinar hosted by the Australian National University today. I will be your host for part of the session, but before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay our respects to the elders past and present. I'll also quickly cover a couple of housekeeping rules. So this webinar is being recorded and we will be posting this on our website at a later stage. So if for some reason you've signed up and you couldn't join us today, or if you want to watch the webinar again or share it with someone, that will be possible. If you have any questions you would not like to ask in front of others, or if you have a question that simply does not get answered today, you can email us on science@anu.edu.au. If you have a more specific question, we will be sharing the contact details of our Research School of Psychology in the chat box, and we will be pasting this very shortly. Now, as part of the panel today, we have Dr. Kristen Murray, who is a clinical psychologist and someone who is very passionate about promoting health and well-being in the community. We're also joined by our current students, Jack and Amelia, who are here to share their experiences and answer any questions that you might have for them today. I'd like to thank Kirsten, Amelia, and Jack for their time. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kirsten to present a brief overview about the program, which will be followed up by Jack and Amelia sharing a bit about their study experiences. After their introductions, we will jump into answering your questions. So please remember to pop your questions into the question and answer tab. So there's a little button at the bottom of your screen. Use that to present any questions that you might have. And please remember to be respectful at all times and keep your questions relevant. I will have my video off and Amelia and Jack will be turning theirs off as well for the first half. So over to you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Akhil. I'll just share my screen. So can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Thanks, Akhil. All right, so it's lovely to be here and to talk with you about the Master of Professional Psychology program here at the ANU. We're really excited to be joined by so many different people from different locations who are interested in this program as a potential pathway for their work towards becoming a psychologist in Australia. I'm also really excited to be joined by Jack and Amelia, who are current second year students in our program, and I know they have some really great insights to share with participants in the webinar today. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of where we're heading, I'll start with some information about the program. So what the program aims to cover, what kinds of classes you would take in the program and how you apply for the program. And then we'll talk about student experiences. So you'll hear from Jack and Amelia and some of their reflections and insights from their time in the program. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. And of course, if you don't have your question answered or not all of your questions are answered in a way that's tailored to your specific situations, please do get in contact and we're happy to provide further advice to you as well. So a little bit of information about where we are here. So we're at the Australian National University, of course, for those of us who are joining from a range of different areas. And the ANU is a really wonderfully situated university in the middle of Canberra. It's surrounded by bushland and it's a really great place to study. It's also a great place to live in the Canberra region too. So for those of you who aren't already in Canberra, it is a really nice place to be. And I'm sure Amelia and Jack will have reflections on what it's like to study here at the ANU. With the great surrounds that we have in the bush capital. We're also really highly ranked as a university. We're consistently ranked as the top university in Australia, and we have more Nobel laureates at the ANU than any other university in the Australian context. So we're really proud of the traditions that we have here at the ANU and the excellent teaching and research that we undertake here. The Research School of Psychology is where the Master of Professional Psychology program is delivered, and we are a young school ranked really highly, particularly in psychology, and we have a really broad staffing profile within the Research School of Psychology. So we cover a range of different areas in your research intensive components of psychology, but also in professional practice. We have researchers here that are world renowned in their areas of focus, including in the clinical and health related spaces, sciences, cognition or perceptual aspects of psychology, social psychology, and more broadly in development, neuroscience, and other areas as well. So in addition to running a number of programs, both at the undergraduate level as well as our postgraduate programs, we have a psychology clinic where students undertaking their clinical psychology training complete placements, and we have a range of staff in the school that are fulfilling academic and professional components of the work that we do as well. And as a school, we're really friendly and accessible. We pride ourselves on looking after the students that are taking programs with us, and that's especially apparent within our postgraduate programs around our pastoral care. And our goal is really to train people in both the theory and the knowledge components of psychology, but also in excellence in research and the application of our principles out in the community to make a real difference in the world in which we live. And so the Master of Professional Psychology is one of our postgraduate options, and it's actually a new option. So we're really excited to talk more about this program in particular today. So the Master of Professional Psychology program is a 2-year postgraduate training program, and we had our first set of students start this in 2020. So it's been really exciting to see our first set of students come through the program, and they're undertaking their internships at the moment, which is wonderful. And they're having really exciting experiences as they start to move into their professional careers, more specifically in psychology. And we have information from students and staff in the program on our website. So if you're interested in meeting some of our students or learning more about some of the work we do, I would really encourage you to have a look at the web information that we have available about the program as well. So we have a little video just to say hello from the MPP program, and this gives you an opportunity to hear a little bit from staff in our program, as well as some of the students that have come through our program that are currently out doing their internships. And it also gives you a really nice overview of how we approach training and teaching within the program and the goals that we've set as a team. So hopefully this works okay through the webinar format, and it'll be just a couple of minutes of a video.
Can't seem to hear it.
Oh, sorry about that. Is it okay now?
So psychology is about people at its heart. It's about
Do
understanding.
you wanna, if you can pause for a second? Yeah,
Sure.
if you go to the slideshow option, the little button next to your scroller
Yes.
that changes the size.
Yep. Oh, that changes the slide or the size?
The size. So if you can go into the full screen mode.
Oh,
All right, sorry.
To all of the different areas of
Nope,
psychology.
still can't see it.
oh.
That's all right. We could probably send it
I could,
to all of the attendees after, unless you, one other option I would suggest is if you stop sharing screen and then reshare
yep.
and
I'll
try
try.
again.
Yep, we can try that. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'll just share again. Let's see if this one works.
Yep.
Psychology is about people at its heart. It's about understanding human behaviour, thoughts and attitudes, and through all of the different areas of psychology, we're really understanding all of the ways in which people interact with the world or with each other. So the Master of Professional Psychology program is a 2-year master's program, and it combines the 4th and 5th years of study that you need to undertake to become a registered psychologist in Australia. And it's for anybody who has their 3-year undergraduate training in psychology and who's always dreamed of becoming a psychologist and helping people.
I noticed that this program, run over 2 years, incorporated all the things that honours year did, but targeted really at becoming a professional psychologist.
The ANU is an outstanding research institution. The ANU has leading academics in a number of different areas: clinical psychology, cognitive psychology, social psychology. So we really cover the spectrum of all the different areas to help us understand people and make a difference. The Master of Professional Psychology program here at the ANU is the first in Australia to combine the 4th and 5th years. What that means for our students is they don't need to apply and do an honours year. They can actually come into the 4th year straight after their undergraduate training and get started learning how to be a psychologist from day one.
I think what attracted me to this course was that did not require an extra year, and I did not have to apply for another degree after this.
There's lots of small group activities, things like role plays or skills workshops that are dedicated spaces to hone your skills as a psychologist.
It's really cool to be able to practice some really difficult skills in a safe and non-judgmental environment.
One of the great strengths of the MPP program is the breadth of training we're providing. So psychology has lots of different roles to play in the community and lots of different areas in which we can contribute. The goal of the MPP program is to produce graduates who have the skills to move and shake across all of those contexts.
ENU has been really helpful in terms of the resources that they have.
It makes me feel really excited that I'll get to go out after this program and be in a position where I can help the people that really need it.
It's hard to become a psychologist, but it's such a rewarding profession. And being able to be part of a student's journey is the best part of my job.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of the MPP program and some of the ways that we approach teaching. And to give you a bit of information about the pathway that the MPP program contributes to in Australia, there are a number of different ways to become a psychologist or a registered psychologist in the Australian context, and that's with the Psychology Board of Australia. And it's a requirement that you undertake a minimum of 6 years training and study. So there are a number of pathways that you can undertake this, and the MPP program falls within the 5-year university training pathway plus a 1-year internship. And so this is where you're undertaking your minimum 3-year undergraduate training. And if that's meeting the APAC requirements or the accreditation requirements, you can then come into this program in the 4th and 5th years to complete those 5 years of university training and then move out into your internships. And as I flagged, the students that we're featuring in the video are out doing that as we speak. So just to give you a little bit more information about those pathways. So we are sitting in the middle pathway here for the MPP program. And as we flagged in the video, it means that you can come in after your 3-year training and you undertake your 4th year, which is often undertaken as a separate year, as a combined 2-year postgraduate master's. So you move into that 4th year of training and then you move straight into your 5th year as part of the 2-year program that we undertake here in the MPP. Once students have finished those 5 years of training or the 2 years with us in the MPP program, they move out into community internships. So they're typically paid roles that students source in the community. And as part of that, they undertake a supervised year of practice, and that's managed under the Psychology Board of Australia. That's not part of the master's program itself. And students then, as part of that time, undertake the National Psychology exam. And so once they've finished that internship and pass the National Psychology exam, they're eligible for general registration as a psychologist in Australia. So MPP, as we've flagged, was actually the first in Australia to combine the 4th and the 5th years of study into this 2-year pathway. And our goal was really to provide a pathway that was applied for students who wanted to get into their professional practice as quickly as they could, by not undertaking a typical 4th year or honours year, which is often how students undertake the 4th year, but move straight into that 4th year and 5th year to learn how to start professional practice as a psychologist. And so we have a really strong emphasis on applied components in training. There's lots of role plays in class, and they start within the 4th year or the 1st year of the program, and dedicated spaces for students to undertake practice of different techniques or strategies that they're learning and get feedback on that from their peers and from staff in the program as well. And so there are 3 major components in the MPP program. You have coursework, which runs across both years of the program, and I'll have some examples of the kinds of courses that you undertake in a moment. There are research projects that students complete in both years of the program as well. The 4th year, which is the 1st year research project, is undertaken in teams, and Jack was a student that undertook this last year, so I'm sure he'd be happy to answer questions about what that was like. But students submit the equivalent of a research paper or an article as their research project, but they undertake that project in a small group with a supervisor from the academic staff here in the Research School of Psychology. And so students students will do that together. They write up a method and a results that's shared among the teams. So everybody submits the same method and results because it's the same project, but they have a separate introduction and discussion as individuals. So they submit it as an individual and receive an individual mark, but part of it is undertaken as a group, which I think has been a really nice opportunity to get experience in research within the program. And in a second year, students also undertake a research project in their second semester, and that's a really applied case-based example that builds on one of the courses that they undertake in that second year. There's also, of course, then a practicum component. So students have an external placement in the second semester of their second year. And both of our students today are currently undertaking their placement experiences, and they're in a range of different settings in the community. They include sort of mental health settings, educational or forensic settings, as well as organisational settings. So we have a real range of experiences that students can undertake in their placement in the second year. And that's a 260-hour placement. There's also a simulated clinic, which students complete in the first semester of second year, which forms part of the 300 hours that need to be completed for placements in the MPP program. And that simulated clinic enables students to work through a sequence of therapy with a simulated patient or client, and that enables them to get practice at how they might sequence cognitive behaviour therapy with a particular client, sort of working through that scaffolding of treatment and care. Just to say hello from our team, we have a range of staff with a range of different backgrounds and experience who teach into our program. We also have additional staff that contribute on a guest or sessional basis as well. And we have a really close working relationship with Canberra Health Services, which is the local public health sector in Canberra. And they have a really strong input and contribution into the program itself, but also undertake some guest teaching as well. So we have a really excited bunch of staff who really enjoy working with students in their pathway to professional psychology practice in Australia. And so why would you undertake the MPP program? So I think for those who are considering becoming a psychologist and they're not necessarily sure which pathways might be the best fit for them, the MPP program at the ANU is really about breadth in training. And so if you have an interest in working in a range of different settings, this is really a great fit for students who really want to get their teeth into a lot of different ways you might practice as a psychologist. And we certainly have a really strong mental health component because that is a really significant area that psychologists work in Australia, but we do our best to give experience across a range of different areas. And we have a really strong values-based focus in terms of the way we've set up the program here at the ANU. So really our goal in the MPP program is to create a society where psychological practice and science support people, communities and nations to flourish. And we do this by providing outstanding education and training to the future generations of psychologists so that they're able to deliver really high quality services in a diverse range of areas in the community, respond and adapt to the changing environment in which we work, which the past couple of years, of course, has been a really great example of how we need to be doing that as a profession, to be innovative, to lead with integrity and also commit to excellence in all that we do, and to use the evidence base and self-reflection to inform the work that we undertake. And we do this in a collaborative environment. We really pride ourselves on having a strong culture and collegiality within the staff and also student relationships and teams that we work here in the MPP program as well, because we want people to access high quality services that really help as many people as we can. And so if you're interested in a range of areas, we really focus a lot on developing skills and knowledge across as many different broad applications of psychology that we can. And so we have a number of people who come in and speak about different areas of practice in the program. And that's a way of helping us think broadly about the roles of psychologists in the community in the areas that we often consider, like mental health, but outside of that as well. So to give you a bit of a sense of some of the courses that you undertake in the program, so we have a really strong emphasis on professional practice throughout, and students start doing a lot of work around self-reflection and self-awareness from the beginning of the program in fourth year. So that's in your Foundations of Professional Psychology course. We then have a range of courses around research methods and statistics, assessment and intervention skills, as well as contextualizing, which is focusing on how we understand diversity and how we adapt our work to appropriately service a range of different people coming in for support. And as I flagged, you of course have a professional psychology project that you undertake as a team in that 4th year. And then moving into the 5th year, at this point, students need to get provisional registration with the Psychology Board of Australia. So there are hurdle requirements moving through the 4th year in order to go into the 5th year. And that also includes meeting other requirements, things like criminal history checks with your registration, English language requirements as well. But really you're building in the 5th year on your assessment and intervention skills and focusing on how you might adapt those for different populations or conditions. You do more intensive work around ethics and professional practice, as well as your simulated placement and your placement experiences. And then we have some work really focusing on applying the work that you're doing in a range of areas into specific contexts, with health psychology being a particular focus at the moment. So you get a really diverse range of experiences across the 2 years of coursework within the program. So for those who are interested in applying, there are some entry requirements that are really important to be aware of. So you need to have a 3-year accredited sequence in psychology. If you've studied outside of Australia, then your qualifications will need to be assessed by the APS, or the Australian Psychological Society, for equivalence. And there's a minimum GPA requirement of 5 out of 7, or of the equivalent, depending on the scale that your university uses. There are English language admission requirements that are for the ANU, but there are also English language requirements that need to be met for provisional registration. So both of those need to be met in the program. And the application itself includes a number of supplementary materials. So things like your CV, there are referee reports and a personal statement, and all of those need to be in by the due date. And as I flagged, there's a 4th year hurdle requirement moving into the 5th year. So students need to pass everything in the 4th year in order to be eligible to move into the 5th year. And they also need to obtain provisional registration at that point, because that's the point where we need students to have that registration with the Psychology Board of Australia. So each year we have a capped number of places. We have up to 25 students that we'll take each year, and there are indicative fees available on the ANU Programs and Courses website, and I have the link to that later on in the slides. And the applications go through the University Admissions Centre, which is in UAC, and they're due by the 30th of September, and that includes all supporting documentation. We then have a shortlisting process, and we invite a short list of students to come for an interview here at the ANU, and that's really to assess somebody's suitability for professional training, and that determines our final offers for the program. And if you would like some more information, as I've flagged, Programs and Courses has great helpful information about the program, but also admissions and application processes as well. So a couple of little flags. This is for some feedback we've had from students in the program, just highlighting some of the benefits around the practical skills training components of the program, the movement from the 4th year into the 5th year and not needing to do a separate honours or grad dip year, depending on what 4th year a student is undertaking, and that the staff really prioritise supporting students. And it's something that we see as a really important and enjoyable part of our job, supporting students in developing their skills in professional psychology. So just a couple of links if you would like to contact us with information. We have an administrative team that supports the program. So that's the rsp.hgr.sa email at anu.edu.au. There's more information about the MPP program at ANU on Programs and Courses. And if you want more information about pathways to registration in Australia, the Psychology Board of Australia or the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council and the Australian Psychological Society are all great places to get information about different pathways and how you might proceed through those pathways as an interested student. So that draws my overview to a close. So I'm now going to hand over to Jack and Amelia, who are going to speak a little bit about their own experiences in the program, and then we're really happy to answer questions. So I'm happy to actually stop sharing my slides, because that might be nicer to be able to see them a bit more clearly as they talk through some of their experiences.
Hi everyone, my name's Jack, this is Amelia. We are both second years in the program, due to graduate this year. So first off, I'd like to give you a bit of information about my background. I completed my undergraduate here at the ANU. I did a double undergraduate in psychology and criminology, mostly because I have an interest in working in the forensic field once I finish this program. And another important thing I thought would be to note was that I didn't have any clinical experience prior to joining this program. So my job and my volunteer experience in the past has been completely unrelated to psych clinical experience. Once I finished my undergraduate, I applied for both the honours program and the MPP program, mostly because I valued staying at the ANU and also staying in Canberra. I was accepted into both programs. However, ultimately I chose the MPP over honours for a couple of key reasons. And I think firstly, and most importantly, my interest is in psychological practice, particularly. So the application of counselling skills and psychological theory rather than psychological research. So I guess one good thing about the MPP program was that it has provided me with the opportunity to experience research, learn about the process of it, which has helped me in my professional career as well, especially in terms of understanding research and applying it to my own practice. But without the emphasis on research for an entire year, like you would have in the honours program, it's still providing me with the opportunity to learn and grow my practical skills in therapy. The opportunity that the ANU provided to undertake my 4th and my 5th year in a single program was an opportunity that I didn't want to miss out on, and particularly, I guess, the risk of reapplying to MPP or the MCP for the future. In terms of the MPP program itself, the structured continuity of the courses throughout the 2 years was something that Kristen just touched on, and something I really valued coming into the program. So it was specifically designed to teach those fundamental foundation skills in the first year, which were built upon throughout the year, broadened, and then into the second year, they began to be tested, expanded into more advanced applications, and particularly once we hit placement, that continuation throughout the 2 years prepared us once we got to placement. And I guess the last thing that the MPP provided, which I found quite unique and helpful, was the simulated clinic, which is an opportunity in the second year we get to pair up with our other students and have like a simulated therapy session over a course of sessions. It was something that was offered that I couldn't find at any other university, and it provided us with the opportunity to safely practice and develop our skills in that simulated environment that didn't really put clients at risk and gave us the space to be a bit more creative and flexible and challenge ourselves to grow our skills before we hit placement and started working with real clients. And then I think a last reflection of mine from the program is that I've particularly appreciated the nature of the program being less academic and more skills and personal development focused. I was originally interested in joining a program that wouldn't be too similar to my undergraduate in terms of the academia, because I wanted to grow my own personal skills and my professional identity as a clinician. This program allowed me to do that through the coursework and the assessment. It has also had a really important emphasis on self-reflection and self-care, which was something that came as a bit of a shock to me initially, especially coming out of undergraduate and the, I guess, competitive nature of undergraduate. But it's been something I've come to appreciate. It's prepared me quite well for the work in my field. Thank you. I'll pass over to Amelia.
Hi guys, so I'm Amelia. Thank you all for joining. So I guess just a little bit about myself. I did my undergrad at ANU as well. Went on to do my honours. Actually, at the time when I started my honours, this program was not available. So, you know, it was a unique journey for me in terms of realising, completing my honours and realising that I'd actually like to spend a bit of time developing my own clinical skills, working across different settings, across different client populations, and then identifying something that perhaps interested me before doing any further research in that area. So, you know, I got to know about the APP program through a friend who was part of the first cohort to graduate from ANU, and she highly recommended the program. So that's how I ended up here. In terms of my experience within the program itself, because I finished my honours year, I actually got course credit, which essentially meant that I did the first year part-time. So if anyone's already done their honours, that might be something that you wanted to look into. And I also found that the course has quite a strong practical focus. which Jack has already mentioned, so I won't talk too much about it. But one thing of interest is probably that the way assessments are graded is quite different within the MPP. So it moves away from the typical ANU grading system, which goes, credit, distinction, high distinction, into more of a CRS or pass-fail model. So this really, or at least in my opinion, this really, takes the pressure off trying to maintain some sort of grade point average or focusing on kind of getting the grades for the grades, but rather shifts the focus onto meeting competencies, developing your own skills, those sort of things. Another thing I really found to be a huge bonus is that we have a very small cohort. So what that's really meant is that we share a lot of our resources. I know everyone by their first name. We meet outside of the program, catch up. So really, it's really tight-knit, supportive environment, and also a really, really fantastic teaching team. So all the lecturers that we've had, and we're actually in our final semester, so all the lecturers within the program are incredibly knowledgeable, very experienced, supportive, approachable. So I felt that, this is a program that's really valued student well-being and development and prioritized it throughout the years. And this is coming from us going through COVID teaching years, so that's been particularly difficult, I would think. Some things that you might want to keep in mind if you decide to apply for the program or decide to accept the program offer is that, this program it involves a lot of your time and energy. So, you need to really, well, my recommendation would be to try and find work that is quite flexible. Within our particular cohort, I actually know quite a few people, including myself, who do tutoring or RA work, which is within the university. What that means is that usually if academics within the university already know what it's like to, work within the uni environment and will be quite flexible around what times that you might want to do. So you don't have to work as an RA or tutor. This wasn't some kind of, self-plug or anything, but just something to keep in mind, that make sure that if you do decide to work outside of the program, make sure if it's flexible, that will make your life a lot easier. Self-care was already mentioned, but really I think community care and building a supportive network around you is equally as important. So particularly, Jack and I are both actually Canberra locals, but this morning we were just talking about how much we take for granted our family, friends that are already here. So if you are an international or interstate student even, I think it's really, really important that you're aware of some of the, the clubs, the resources, everything available within the ANU itself. We have several clubs, ANUSA, PASA, who are our undergraduate and postgraduate student bodies, and just a range of resources and support available. Please do seek those out and, embrace those opportunities. Lastly, I just wanted to say that within this program, there is quite a strong focus on putting yourself out there, and a lot of the time embracing discomfort. We do quite a lot of role plays, group activities, fish bowls, those sort of things where you're really practicing those skills. And sometimes, or I should say a lot of the time, that's when you don't necessarily feel fully competent in those skills. It's a practice environment, so embrace those opportunities, reflect, learn, be introspective. And yeah, I'm sure if you decide to embark on this journey, I'm sure you'll all do fantastic and you'll enjoy it. Back to Kristen or...
Thank you, Kristen.
Perfect. Well, those were some really, really good tips, Amelia and Jack. And I can specifically relate to the last bit where you spoke about what it's like to come here as an international student. I came here as an international student many, many years ago, and it did actually help to participate in these clubs and societies and just put myself out there. I'm just going to quickly jump into some of the questions. I'll start with a follow-up to one of the things you were talking about, Amelia and Jack. So someone has asked us, how many hours a week are you finding you can work alongside the MPP?
So, I mean, this is, I would imagine, a very individual question, right? So how much time, how you manage your time, how much kind of responsibilities you have outside of work, all of that would affect how many hours you might be able to work. Like I think I already mentioned it in my spiel somewhere. I got credit for my honours. So I did the first year essentially part-time, even though I was enrolled as a full-time student. So I had more leeway to work in that year, and I pretty much ended up working part-time, if a little bit more, but that's because my circumstances allowed that. And then I've now, most of my work that I do is currently RA, research assistant or tutoring, marking, that sort of work, which essentially allows me to work outside of normal office hours. So that's again enabled me to continue working essentially part-time. But I mean, I don't know, Jack, have you had a...
Yeah, my experience is very different. I have worked full-time for the past 2 years, and I've undertaken the course full-time. It's not something I would recommend doing because it's very onerous on yourself. And this program does require a lot of your energy and also deserves a lot of your energy. I would find that, I guess, a little bit of self-reflection about how you find your own time management, as well as where you find your capacity is really important. I know most, if not all, the students in our program currently are working. So working is not something that is, it's something that the program understands that people need to work. People have a life outside of the program. Yeah, I think a bit of self-reflection on how much you're willing to take is really important.
Yeah.
And would you say your first semester allows you the time to figure that out? So would you say that's when students should actually try and think about how much they want to work and how much they want to dedicate towards their study?
Yeah, I think if you've got a job that's willing to be flexible with you, the first semester is a good opportunity for that, because the coursework and your research project is really starting off in its fundamental stage before it really, I guess, kicks off by the time you get to second year.
Okay, excellent.
There's several employment opportunities within the university itself that operates on quite a flexible model. Yeah.
Right,
and I guess, Akil, maybe just to add to that a little bit, I think Amelia and Jack's suggestions are really great and insightful suggestions around work, and I think it's probably worth flagging. I know that Jack and Amelia both identified this, but as a postgraduate program, it is an intense program, and so there are a lot of demands in the program, and that's by nature what it's like to study postgraduate psychology. So it is something to be mindful about. Absolutely, people undertake work, and there are also demands in the program, and we run the program in person. There are no online virtual options, so it's face-to-face, but we provide timetables with as much notice as we can to help people work around those. But just probably worth flagging, as postgrad study, it is intensive.
Perfect. Kirsten, there's a few other questions that I see you've already answered in the chat. Thank you for that. There's also a few more that you said you'd like to answer live. So I might just step back and leave these to you.
Sure, Akil, thank you. Yeah, so a couple of these I thought might be easier to verbally answer. So I'll start with the first. The first is, what type of references are best for the application, such as professional or academic? I would strongly recommend professional and academic references. So you may have lecturers or course conveners that you can speak to. If you're working, you can absolutely use employers as referees. With any referee, of course, you want to identify people who you think can speak to your suitability and skills. And so definitely be thinking about across those different sectors. That's the kinds of referees, and perhaps even Jack and Amelia might have some reflections on how they approached that process. And just linking that, because there's another question in the chat around the interview process itself. So the interview process is essentially set up as a range of different stations people undertake. There's only so much information that we provide about it because it's there to do your suitability for professional training, but essentially it's typically a half-day block, and people come in, they participate in a range of different activities, and that gives us a really holistic assessment of students coming into the program. And because it is a competitive process, unfortunately, sometimes people miss out who we really strongly encourage to apply again. So if you find yourself in that position, please do apply again, and students can get feedback through that process as well. There might be things that would be beneficial for them to work on and then come back in to the program as well. So hopefully that helps a bit with those two questions. I might, just before I go to the others, just go to Amelia and Jack, if you had any thoughts on what referees you considered or how you approached that.
Yeah, so I guess when I applied, I had 2 referees. One was a tutor I had at the time at the ANU who was willing to be a referee for me. And I guess in choosing a tutor, I looked for someone who was able to talk about my academic ability as well as my professionalism, how I work in teams in the class. So I did look for a tutor who I had built a bit of a relationship with. My other referee was my boss at the time, who was able to comment on my ability to work in a team, as well as my professionalism, which were, I guess, 2 really important things.
I did something similar. So because I completed my honours, my thesis supervisor was one of my references, and then again, my supervisor at work. What, I guess, on a general note, what I found is most tutors, lecturers, thesis supervisors, whoever you're planning on approaching, will be quite experienced and used to people approaching them for a reference letter. At least that's been my experience. So you shouldn't have too much trouble with it won't be too, out of the way or anything. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you both. And we do our referees predominantly through the HODSPA system, which is a national referee system. And it means that students, if they're applying to multiple programs, can have their referees do the report once and then is shared across different institutions. So that's information on our programs and courses website for anyone, if that's helpful at all. Just moving to the next question. So what are the PhD pathways after MPP graduation? So the MPP program, because it has a research component that's based in a team, but also the number of credit points in the program here at ANU, it's actually not a prerequisite for PhD. So that is something to keep in mind. If you're thinking about taking a PhD pathway at the moment, it's not a pathway to a PhD here. You can always chat to other universities if you're looking at doing PhDs elsewhere, because you are coming out with a master's degree. So it's really a decision depending on the universities. But at the moment at the ANU, if you're really wanting to do a research intensive pathway, then other 4th year options might suit your career aspirations better. But that's something to keep in mind with the PhDs. And if you have particular questions, please get in contact with us and we're happy to explain that. It's just based on the number of sort of credit points across the degree here at the moment. And this kind of relates a little bit to the next question. So the pass-fail structure in grading the program. So in terms of the GPA, the way the GPA would work out of the MPP program is that there are 2 courses that receive a numerical grade, and they're the 2 research courses. So that's the 4th year research project and the 5th year capstone research project as well. So those 2 courses, students receive a numerical grade. So if there's a need to receive a GPA, so for example, if you are applying for another degree elsewhere and you need a GPA out of the program, that's where the GPA will come from. Otherwise, the courses are all graded as a CRS or course requirement satisfied, and that's because you're really focused on competency-based learning. So if you are then interested in GPAs, that will actually happen out of those research courses. And then in terms of the supplementary form, so the supplementary form includes just information about your application. Do get in contact with us if you'd like specific details about it. It also can include then attachments like your CV or resume, your personal statement as well, which is really about why this is a program that you might be interested in and why the ANU in particular for your training as a professional psychologist. So you'll be able to get more information about the application process and forms on the program and courses website as well. So they're all the ones in the chat.
Perfect. Kirsten, I've also popped in a couple of questions that we received at the time of registration into the chat box at the bottom that you can see.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just keep adding questions in there.
Let's keep talking.
You're happy to go through them.
Sure, not a problem at all. So the first question, can you apply for an MPP if you're enrolled in a Bachelor of Psychology honours and drop to a Bachelor of Science if accepted, to not lose the honours place if rejected? That is a question I'm actually not sure about. I think if whoever sent that question in, I would strongly encourage to contact us, the RSP HDRSA email address. I think that's probably better assessed on an individual basis. You can certainly apply for an MPP program and then make a decision. I don't know what impact that has on your current enrolment, so I would contact us to get a more tailored response. We might need to go to college just to get some clarification around that one. So please do contact us about that question. The next, so how competitive is the master's pathway compared to the honours pathway? What is the average GPA for accepted students? The average GPA changes year to year, so I can't provide any particular mean GPA. The minimum is 5, but outside of that, it just depends on the cohort that we take in. And part of the assessment is around your suitability for professional training. So as part of the shortlisting and interview process, going into a career in psychology means that we're looking for particular characteristics in individuals because of the work that you'd be doing. And so GPA is part of that picture, but it's not the full picture about what makes somebody suitable to train as a psychologist. So the mean will change year to year, and it's really dependent on the group of applications that we receive and then the shortlisting and assessment processes that we undertake with our applicants. But there's a minimum of 5 out of 7 GPA. So the next one, we have one coming up that I know Jack can answer in a moment. The next one is, do you need an honours degree to be able to undertake this master's degree? The answer is no. As you will have heard from Amelia and Jack, we have a range of students. Some students have undertaken an honours or a 4th year equivalent. So for example, a postgrad dip in psychology. Others are coming in after their 3 years of undergraduate study or equivalent 3 years of undergraduate study. And so you don't need an honours year to come in. In fact, the 4th year, which is the first year of our program, is an equivalent 4th year qualification. And so you don't need to do that. But if you have done an honours degree and you decide you'd like to pursue the Master of Professional Psychology, we welcome your application. As Amelia flagged, if you have done that 4th year already, you can apply for some credit. There's a maximum amount of credit we can approve, and typically that is in the research components because you will have undertaken a thesis in your 4th years typically. So there is some credit you can receive, but you still undertake coursework in that first year as well. So do consider us either way, and we really enjoy having a range of students who've done different pathways moving into MPP as well. So thankfully the next one I can pass to another person so they can speak for a little bit. So the next one is the scope in criminal psychology. So I can flag just briefly part of the coursework we do, try to bring in as much breadth as we can. The forensic, health, educational, organisational components are the areas we've been trying to bring in some exposure to for students. And of course, there's quite a bit of training in mental health specifically. But Jack is someone who is getting a bit more experience in this space at the moment. So I might throw to you, Jack, if you'd like to add anything that might be helpful for students.
Yeah. So I'm currently on placement working in the forensic mental health space. This is something that I was very interested in and keen on to move on into a career. And so this is something I came into the program almost as a small prerequisite of my own. The coursework itself doesn't focus heavily on criminal psychology or any other, I guess, discipline for that matter. What the coursework instead does is give us some very good foundational skills that can be applied in any different context. So I'm sure Amelia can agree, working in a different space, we all undertook the same training, but they're very broad and applicable. The placements that we have are picked specifically so there are opportunities for us to grow and learn in that space and in that field and discipline. So currently I have the wonderful opportunity of learning how I can apply the skills I've learned in this program to the criminal and forensic psychology space. So I think to broaden that question out, the scope for a lot of different disciplines is definitely there. And that's something that the program works pretty one-on-one with us with in order to, I guess, match our interests. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. Great answer. And maybe Amelia, if you'd like to add anything, because I know you're in another different space in the more educational space. So there might be people watching this who are interested in that as well.
Yeah, so I'm in the school psychology space, which is, we have opportunities in group supervision to chat about how placements are going, and everyone's doing things that are completely different. Mine is also very different to what some other people are doing. So typically what I've found is that our course focuses on some foundational skills that we build on within placement. So what I'm doing in placement is a real extension of what I've already learned, and anything sort of that goes further that we haven't covered is actually being covered by training from the organization itself. So you'll learn some really good foundational skills, and then you have plenty of training opportunities within placements, within internships to kind of continue that training.
Thanks, Amelia and Jack. There's a couple of other questions coming up in the question and answer. Akil, should I go to those as a priority?
Yep.
Yep. Excellent. So we have the first one is the difference between the Master of Clinical Psychology and the Master of Professional Psychology at ANU. That's a great question. The best way to talk about the difference, one is that you start the programs at a different spot. So for a clinical psychology, you have to have done the 4 years. So you must have either an honours or a 4th year equivalence to move into be eligible to the 5th and 6th years of training. So it's a 6-year training program in the clinical psychology masters, whereas the MPP is a 5 years, so there's a slight difference in the pathway. In terms of the content, the biggest difference is the breadth versus depth. So a clinical psychology program is really looking at depth in the clinical psychology specific space. So in terms of differences of content, there will be a little bit more around more specific mental health conditions and how you might treat those, that in the MPP program, you don't do as much discussion around. And there is a little bit of an additional training in other therapeutic modalities because you're in the 5th and the 6th year, you've got a little bit more space to do that. So that breadth and depth is how we distinguish them. However, we also have some co-teaching that happens across the program. So students in both programs do ethics and professional practice together, and they're both currently doing a health psychology course together. So we've selected particular courses where we think the students would be really benefited from coming together. And so there are some content or coursework components that are shared, but then the remainder of those programs is done separately because they have different learning goals and learning outcomes, and they're producing students to work in different kinds of settings. So MPP is the breadth and clinical has more depth in its specific area of practice. So that's hopefully a helpful distinction for students that are coming in. In terms of part-time options, absolutely, we have students completing the program in a part-time capacity, and as Amelia flagged, if you come in with a 4th year qualification, that first year, if you receive credit, is essentially a part-time load, but students can do both years of the program in a part-time capacity. That's a discussion you just have with the program convener. So for students at the moment, that's me, and they come and we work out a pathway for them to make sure they're doing the sequencing that we need in terms of moving the program, moving through the program. And at the moment, that tends to be coursework in the first year, then the research in the second year, and then the sort of 5th year has a specific structure building up to placements and that capstone project. So we just have unique pathways for students, but it's absolutely possible. It's just a conversation and a kind of pathway meeting with the convener. So we have a question about sport and health psychology. So health psychology, absolutely. There is a course at the moment in the program, the advanced applications in MPP, which is co-taught with the clinical students or clinical psych students. And so there is a dedicated course around health psychology that focuses on how we might use psychological principles to support healthy behaviours and management of chronic illnesses in the community. In terms of sports psychology, we have had guests come in and speak about the application of CBT in particular into a sport or performance context. But it's actually an area that quite a number of students have an interest in the program. So we're always thinking about ways to integrate more examples of how you take the training of MPP into other spaces as well. And we have another question. So in terms of the breadth and the depth distinction, one of the things to flag, I guess, when you become a psychologist, you have a lifelong training journey. So what we aim to do in the MPP program is to provide really strong foundations in evidence-based treatments. And in MPP specifically, that's cognitive behaviour therapy. So you start that in the first year or the fourth year of your training. You then advance that to think about how it applies to specific conditions or contexts in the second year. And that means for students in our program, they're getting a really strong grounding in the kind of strongest, I guess, evidence-based intervention. There are other parts or other types of interventions that they get exposure to throughout. So things like motivational interviewing, and some guests might talk about other ways of practicing or other types of practice as well. But when students go out into their internship or even on their placement and in their career, they can learn and practice in a range of different therapeutic modalities. So the master's or the training that you do to become a registered psychologist doesn't limit you for the rest of your career. In fact, the greatest part I think about psychology, other than the range of areas you can work and the people you get to meet and support, is that you continue to grow and learn throughout your career. So even though you might be doing cognitive behaviour therapy through your training, you might continue that, or you might specialise in a particular way of using that therapy or a different kind of therapy with an evidence base, and you apply that in your career as you move forward. So they're different training pathways. You might end up in different roles, but that doesn't limit you in what you choose to do. And if you do an MPP pathway, but you decide you'd like to seek endorsement or specialist endorsement in clinical psychology, sports psychology, organisational psychology, that's a pathway you can undertake as well through a bridging program. And there's information on that on the Psychology Board of Australia website. So you may choose to go and become a clinical psychologist in future, and you may not as well. So you've got a lifelong career ahead of you when you're doing any kind of practice in this space.
Oh, perfect. Thanks for that, Kristen. While we just wrap up, I'm just going to quickly add that if you have any questions for us, you can always email us on rsp.hdr.sa@anu.edu.au or science@anu.edu.au. I've popped that into the chat. In the interest of time, I think we won't be taking any more questions, even if they come through. This has been really great. Kristen, Amelia, Jack, I work at the faculty and I also got to learn quite a few things that I myself didn't know today. So thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. Also, a big thank you to all of the attendees that have joined us today. Like I said, if you have missed out or if you want to share this with someone, we will have the recording up probably by the end of this week. But other than that, I just want to wish you all a very good evening, and thank you once again for joining. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.